Andrew Lewer to move Amendment A.
Thank you very much, Mr Deputy Speaker. The reason why I've tabled my amendment is that the bill in its current form has a problem. This section of the Public Order Bill is leading us into the territory of thought crimes and creates unprecedented interference with the rights to freedom of speech and thought in the UK. Yes.
If he were to go on Twitter now, he would find a recording of an arresting officer telling a lady that praying silently is already a crime. And we haven't passed this bill yet. Are we not really in Orwellian territory of thought crime, as he said?
Yeah. I couldn't agree with my honourable friend more. This is the concern within this. And the section of the bill I'm referring to is Lord's Amendment 5, amended in the House of Lords by Baroness Sugg on the matter of interference within buffer zones. Now, I understand that many people will find it highly inappropriate for vocal or difficult protests to be right outside abortion clinics, and I categorically condemn harassment against women at all points in their life, let alone near an abortion facility. But that's a world away from the police being able to detain people and question them over what they're doing if they're merely standing there or praying quietly, or worse, if they are praying silently, and be asked by the police, by agents of the state, what are you thinking about? Yeah.
I thank the member for giving way, and I commend him for bringing this to the House. Does he agree with me that the government could do one thing today, and they could indicate very clearly that this does not apply to people engaged in prayer? And secondly, does he agree with me that if the government allows this to continue, that they're going to turn the police into a laughing stock? When people mock them and say, what about all the knife crime, what about all the other problems that you have, and you're arresting people for silently praying, it really does make a fool of the police, doesn't it?
I think it does cause reputational damage to the police. The videos that some colleagues have already seen are hugely disturbing and make it very difficult for ministers to stand up and talk about the police is on your side and they'll defend you when there's a woman on her own standing perfectly still being harassed by the police. And I agree entirely with the comments that he's made. So what are you thinking is within the bill in its current state and remains despite the Suggs amendment. And such actions entirely unacceptable in a free and open society. And I could have my pick of dystopian novels, and one of which has already been referenced, where it would not be out of place. These are... Yes?
Thank the honourable member for giving way. And no one at all on any side of the House wants women or anyone to be harassed going about their lawful business. But does he agree with me that there's already legislation down so local councils can apply buffer zones around abortion clinics and other such areas when there is necessary? And I think 3 or 4 other local authorities have actually put in buffer zones already. So this extra amendment is not necessary, as they already have the powers?
Yeah, and indeed this amendment extends something that's already quite disturbing, where some of these video instances have already taken place, still further. The zones would be the only place in the UK, the only place where consensual communication is banned by the state. And simply saying that sentence makes it seem such an absurdity. And to those who would say it would never happen, it has already happened. In December last year in Birmingham, Isabel Vaughan's Bruce was searched, arrested, interrogated, placed on a criminal trial for silently praying within one of these zones, and has now been arrested again. And only last month...
Will my honourable friend give way?
Hello.
I think there's an important detail that's missing from what my honourable friend just said, which is, my understanding is that when she was arrested, the clinic wasn't even open. I mean, it just seems that we are going to extrapolate on an extrapolation to make absolutely sure that anybody can be arrested for anything if we continue down this line.
That's exactly right. Thank my honourable friend for that contribution. And indeed, the questions there were, are you praying? Answer, I might be. What are you praying about? Well, I'm praying in my head. It's extraordinary that leads to somebody being arrested in this country in 2023. And last month, a father, an army veteran, was fined in Bournemouth after being grilled by the police regarding what he was silently praying about in his own head. This points the way to a world where freedom from offence, or even potential offence, supersedes freedom of speech and religious belief. And we've created, therefore, a situation where we can impose criminal penalties for silent thought. And there will be countless ramifications. For one, it would make it increasingly difficult for my honourable friend, the MP for Congleton, as the Prime Minister's Special Envoy for Freedom of Religion or Belief, to advocate for those freedoms abroad. You know, we often see debates in this House where we're all sort of telling the rest of the world what to do, and they'll turn round to us and say, how can you lecture us about religious freedom when there are areas where you can't even pray in your own country without being arrested and hauled off by the police?
Very grateful to my honourable friend for giving way, and because he's speaking first, I'd like to give him an opportunity to anticipate an argument with which I have some considerable sympathy that we're going to hear urged against him. And that is that we have seen in other countries, particularly the United States, where there are loud, noisy protests outside abortion clinics, and that's what's undoubtedly led to this movement for zones. So will he confirm that if his amendment goes through, it won't in any way affect the ability of the law to prevent women being genuinely harassed when they go to abortion clinics?
I'm grateful for that, and that's an extremely important part of this amendment, that it makes sure that those protections are very much still in place, as indeed they already are under the Police Crime Sentencing and Courts Act of 2022. Censorship of this sort is a notoriously slippery slope, and it might not be your thoughts that are being criminalised today, but I think we should all be careful not to open the door to that tomorrow about some other opinions that people might hold about something else. I do believe that the sub-amendments provide some welcome scope for an improvement to address some of the concerns I've mentioned, but issues remain, and hence why this amendment today. It provides much needed clarity to the broad and vague terminology currently in the sub-amendment of influencing that's in the bill. The amendments introduce no substantive change to the revised Clause 10, and they therefore respect whatever individuals' opinions of that are. They respect the desire of both houses to introduce buffer zones, but they seek to ensure that any law doing that doesn't impose an unreasonable limit on freedom of speech and thought, as was seen in the recent prosecution against those engaged, and I can still hardly believe I'm saying this in the House of Commons, the prosecution in this country against those engaged in silent prayer. The first would therefore specify an exempt consensual communication, silent prayer and peaceful presence from criminalisation, and the second would pause the implementation of censorship zones until the government carries out a review into what's really going on outside clinics in the UK, not in the USA or in other countries. And in 2018, this same government found that such zones would be disproportionate and unnecessary, since the vast majority of activity was peaceful and helpful, instances of harassment were rare, and existing legislation, as my honourable friend has just mentioned, was perfectly capable of dealing with any instances of criminality. So what's changed? Law must be evidence-based. The evidential basis for the crackdown has been paltry, and I hope my elected colleagues will join me in demanding that our laws are fair, just and considered. It's an abdication of good and standard process in this House that this part of the bill has made it this far in its current state. Much of what buffer zones claim to deal with is already dealt with in law, and more effectively under the Police Crime and Sentencing and Courts Act, yes.
I'm extremely grateful for having given way, which is precisely why, Mr. Speaker, successive Prime Ministers and Health Secretaries, including the existing Chancellor Exchequer, took the view there was no need for further action, and indeed didn't see this as a matter of free vote, which abortion, as a generality, rightly is. This is about freedom. It's not about the purpose of that freedom or the location of it. It's about the ability to think and speak and pray freely.
Yes, it is, and then that's a very important point, that this isn't about a debate about opinions about abortion. Opinions about abortion are very wide and widespread and differ hugely throughout the House. This is not about that. It's about the fact that the PCSO already gives police the power to, quote, place any condition on a public assembly that's necessary to prevent disorder, damage, disruption, impact or intimidation. It's already there. That's far more targeted and proportionate, and if you don't feel that's sufficient, then that's a conversation about PSPOs, not imposing nationwide buffer zones. Therefore, those who don't accept my First Amendment and don't go along with this must be able to justify both to themselves and the public why they don't believe private prayer is a fundamental human right in the United Kingdom. This bill must absolutely not outlaw our fundamental human rights, and I remain far from convinced that unamended it will not. Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker.